The night air carried the scent of blood. Rowan inhaled deeply, her senses heightened by the thrill of battle. The moon hung fat and watchful above the forest canopy, illuminating the scene of carnage around her. Bodies of royal guards lay scattered across the clearing, their silver insignias gleaming dully in the moonlight. None had expected the attack. None had survived. Rowan wiped her blade on the cloak of a fallen soldier. 23 years of fighting had taught her efficiency. No wasted movements, no unnecessary kills, just swift, brutal precision. The raid on King Magnus's supply caravan had gone perfectly. Food, weapons, and medicine now safely secured for the rebel camp. Pain lanced through her shoulder where a guard's blade had caught her. The wound was deep, but not fatal. She had endured worse. The scars that mapped her body told stories of survival against impossible odds, each mark a testament to her refusal to bow to the tyrant king who had stolen their lands and driven her people into exile. A figure emerged from the shadows, tall and lean with golden hair catching the moonlight. Logan. Her brother in everything but blood. The man she had fought beside for over a decade. His scent, familiar as her own, carried notes of white amber and frost. "The perimeter is secure," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "No survivors to report our position." Rowan nodded, her eyes scanning the tree line from habit. "The medicine alone will save dozens in the camp. Magnus's court can survive without their luxuries for one season." Logan's mouth curved into a rare smile. "A fine victory. Worth celebrating, I think." He reached into his pack and produced a silver flask. "I've been saving this, taken from the private reserves of the royal family themselves." Rowan raised an eyebrow. Logan was not one for celebrations. His usual demeanor remained serious even after their greatest victories. Something felt different tonight. His eyes gleamed with an intensity she had never seen before. "To the downfall of Magnus," he said, raising the flask, "and to the rightful heir taking his throne." The wine was sweet on her tongue but left an unfamiliar bitterness. Rowan swallowed, watching Logan over the rim of the flask. His eyes never left her face. A strange heaviness began to spread through her limbs. Warmth turned to numbness. The flask slipped from suddenly clumsy fingers. Understanding dawned with horrifying clarity. "What have you done?" Her voice sounded distant to her own ears. Her legs buckled beneath her. Logan caught her before she hit the ground, lowering her with surprising gentleness. The moonlight transformed his familiar features into something alien and cold. A stranger wearing her friend's face. His scent remained the same, but now she detected something else beneath it, something dark and ancient. "What needed to be done," he whispered, cradling her head. "For the greater good, for the realm." Rowan struggled against the spreading paralysis, fighting to keep her eyes open. She had survived countless battles, had become legend among both rebels and royals for her ferocity. The demon wolf, they called her. Untouchable, unstoppable. To die like this, betrayed by her closest ally, seemed an obscene joke. Logan drew a ceremonial dagger from his belt. The blade gleamed with strange runes that seemed to pulse with inner light. Not a weapon for killing, but something else, something worse. "Your soul is strong, Rowan," he murmured, almost reverently. "The strongest I have ever known. That's why it must be you." The blade hovered over her heart. Rowan strained against the poison's hold, but her body refused to obey. All her years of training, rendered meaningless by a few drops of poison. Rage burned where strength had failed. "I'll find you," she managed through numb lips. "Whatever comes after death, I will find you." A fleeting expression of regret crossed Logan's features. "There are worse fates than death, old friend." The blade plunged down. Pain erupted, not physical, but something deeper. She felt herself being torn away, ripped from her own flesh. Darkness consumed her consciousness, punctuated by flashes of strange, fragmented visions. A grand palace, a young woman's terrified face, blood on white marble, a silver crown. Then nothing. The first sensation was softness, impossible softness enveloping her body. Rowan had slept on forest floors and hard camp beds her entire life. This feeling of sinking into cloud-like comfort was utterly foreign. Rowan forced heavy eyelids open, then immediately closed them against the assault of bright sunlight streaming through enormous windows. Windows with no defensive bars. Windows large enough for a small army to enter. Strategically indefensible. She tried again, allowing her eyes to adjust gradually. The room that materialized around her defied comprehension. Opulent didn't begin to describe it. Silk sheets beneath her, velvet curtains framing those ridiculous windows, intricate tapestries depicting royal hunts, a chamber larger than the entire command tent of the rebel camp. Rowan attempted to sit up. Her body responded strangely, lighter and weaker than she remembered. The movement sent cascades of long, auburn hair spilling over her shoulders, hair much longer and more lustrous than her own short, practical style. Panic flared as her hands flew to her face, encountering features that felt wrong. Smoother skin, higher cheekbones, a smaller nose, not her face, not her body. Before she could process this impossibility, the massive double doors burst open. 2 young women in formal black and silver uniforms rushed in, their faces pictures of relief. "My lady, you're awake!" the shorter one exclaimed, nearly tripping over her skirts in her haste to reach the bedside. "We were so worried." Rowan instinctively reached for a weapon that wasn't there. Her muscles, normally coiled and ready, felt soft and untrained. "Lady Diana, are you feeling better?" the taller maid asked, pressing a cool hand to Rowan's forehead. "The physician said the fever had broken, but when you wouldn't wake—" Rowan swatted the hand away, or tried to. The gesture came out as a gentle brush instead of the forceful movement she intended. "Who is Diana?" Her voice emerged higher, melodic, nothing like her own rough tones. The maids exchanged worried glances. "She's still confused," the taller one whispered. "Lady Victoria said this might happen." Before Rowan could demand answers, the doors opened again. A woman swept in, her emerald gown rustling importantly. She radiated authority, from her perfectly coiffed silver-streaked hair to her ramrod-straight posture. The scent of expensive perfume barely masked the unmistakable notes of an Omega. But this was no ordinary Omega. This woman carried herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to wielding power. "Oh, Diana, my precious daughter," the woman exclaimed, seizing Rowan's hand in a grip that belied her delicate appearance. "What were you thinking?" "Daughter?" Rowan stared at the woman, searching for any trace of familiarity, and finding none. "The healer said Diana needs rest, my lady," one of the maids interjected timidly. "Thank the gods she can speak," the woman said, ignoring the maid. "With the mating ceremony so close, imagine if she'd been left mute or worse." She shuddered delicately. "Disfigured? Mating ceremony?" Rowan pulled her hand free, scooting away from the stranger claiming to be her mother. "I think there's been a mistake," she said carefully, testing this new, unfamiliar voice. "I'm not who you think I am." The woman's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Why is she speaking like a commoner?" she stage-whispered to the maids. "I can hear you," Rowan snapped, but the intimidating tone she intended came out sounding petulant instead. The slap caught her completely by surprise. Not because she hadn't seen it coming, Rowan had spent years reading opponents' body language, but because it actually hurt. A mere Omega's open hand against her cheek stung like a knife slash. "Diana Evelyn Victoria," the woman hissed, "if you think for 1 second you can act your way out of this marriage—" Instinct took over. Rowan struck back, putting all her strength into the blow. Instead of sending the woman flying across the room, as it should have, the slap merely caused her to stumble backward with a shocked yelp. A cold realization settled in Rowan's stomach. This body, this Diana's body, was weak, untrained, and apparently the daughter of this formidable Omega woman. "How dare you raise your hand to me?" Rowan growled, compensating for physical weakness with the ferocity that had made hardened warriors tremble. "Try that again and you won't have hands." The maids gasped in unison. The woman, Lady Victoria presumably, stood frozen in shock, one hand pressed to her reddening cheek. "My lady," the shorter maid whispered, clutching Rowan's arm, "when did you learn to speak like that?" Rowan ignored her, focusing on getting her bearings. She needed information, fast. "Where am I?" she demanded. Lady Victoria recovered her composure, smoothing her dress with trembling hands. "You're in your chambers, obviously, in the palace." "Which palace?" Rowan pressed, dread mounting. Lady Victoria's expression suggested she was questioning her daughter's sanity. "King Magnus's palace, of course. Where else would we be?" The room seemed to tilt violently. King Magnus, her enemy, the tyrant whose soldiers she'd been killing for years, the man whose head she'd sworn to take. "Magnus wants to see me?" Rowan asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Yes," Lady Victoria replied slowly, as if speaking to a child. "The Alpha King wishes to greet you officially now that you've arrived on his territory." Alpha King, territory, the terminology of wolf hierarchy. Rowan had always found it pretentious, the way the royal family and nobility clung to ancient traditions. Alphas ruling over betas and omegas, as if their secondary gender determined their worth. "And why does the king wish to see me?" Rowan asked, buying time to process this impossible situation. Lady Victoria's patience visibly frayed. "Because, daughter mine, you are to be mated to his son, Prince Alexander, the future Alpha King, a match we have worked years to secure, a match you will not jeopardize with this strange behavior." The information hit Rowan like a physical blow. She was somehow in the body of an Omega noble named Diana, who was betrothed to the son of her sworn enemy, the prince she had fantasized about killing in battle countless times. "When am I expected to appear before the king?" Rowan asked, mind racing through possibilities of escape. "This evening. The royal physician has cleared you to attend the welcome feast, though you were instructed to rest until then." Lady Victoria studied her with growing suspicion. "What has gotten into you, Diana? You've never questioned protocol before." Rowan forced herself to relax, to appear compliant. "The fever," she murmured. "I'm still confused. I need time to remember myself." The explanation seemed to satisfy Lady Victoria, whose expression softened marginally. "Rest, then. The maids will prepare you for tonight." She moved toward the door, then paused. "And Diana, whatever game you're playing, end it now. The king does not tolerate disobedience, even from his future daughter-in-law." When the door closed behind Lady Victoria, Rowan turned to the wide-eyed maids. "Leave me," she commanded. They hesitated, exchanging uncertain glances. "My lady, we should help you dress." "Out!" Rowan snapped with such authority that both young women scurried from the room immediately. Alone at last, Rowan forced herself to breathe deeply, fighting panic. She needed to think clearly, to understand what had happened and how to reverse it. She rose from the bed, legs unsteady beneath her. This body felt wrong, proportioned differently than her own. Smaller, more delicate. She made her way to a large mirror mounted on the wall and froze at the reflection. The face that stared back was beautiful in a conventional, aristocratic way. Porcelain skin unmarked by scars or sun, large, expressive eyes of deep emerald, high cheekbones and full lips. The body beneath the silk nightgown was slender, but curved in ways Rowan's warrior physique had never been. No muscle definition, no battle scars, soft hands that had never held a weapon. "What have you done, Logan?" she whispered to her reflection. She tried to call forth her wolf, that internal presence all were folk could summon. Instead of the familiar fierce presence of her inner beast, she felt something timid and uncertain stirring within. Diana's wolf was as different from Rowan's as their human forms, submissive where Rowan's had been dominant, cautious where hers had been fierce. Rowan closed her eyes, struggling to make sense of the impossible. The ceremonial dagger, the ancient runes, Logan's cryptic words about her strong soul. Somehow, he had transferred her consciousness into another body. But why? And what had happened to Diana? A fragmented memory surfaced, not hers, but belonging to this body. Diana standing on a balcony, staring down at the courtyard far below. Overwhelming despair. The decision to jump rather than face a forced mating. The sensation of falling. Diana had killed herself the same night Logan had performed his ritual on Rowan. The realization brought bile to Rowan's throat. She wasn't just inhabiting another body, she was possessing a dead woman. Or rather, a woman who should be dead, but whose body now housed Rowan's soul instead. She needed more information about Diana, about the royal family, about Logan's possible connection to all of this. Moving to the window, Rowan gazed out at Magnus's kingdom. From this height, she could see the palace grounds spreading below, transitioning into the capital city beyond. Beyond that, the dark line of the forest where her people had been forced to flee, where her rebel camps still fought for survival. The very enemies she had dedicated her life to destroying were now to be her family by marriage. The irony was not lost on her. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Rowan tensed, but called out permission to enter. A different maid appeared, older than the others, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "Lady Diana," she said with a small curtsy, "I'm Elena. I've brought your medication and some food." Rowan nodded cautiously. "Thank you." Elena placed a tray on a small table, then produced a vial of amber liquid. "Your calming tonic, my lady. The physician insists you continue taking it." Rowan eyed the vial suspiciously. "What exactly is in this tonic?" Elena seemed taken aback by the question. "The same herbs as always, my lady, to soothe your nerves and temper your more difficult moods." Rowan understood immediately. They were drugging Diana to make her more compliant, more fitting for her role as an Omega bride. The realization sparked fury, but Rowan controlled her expression. "I won't be needing it anymore," she said firmly. "I'm feeling much improved." Elena hesitated. Lady Victoria was most insistent. "Lady Victoria is not the one taking the tonic," Rowan cut in. "I am. And I say I no longer require it." Elena studied her for a long moment, then smiled slightly. "As you wish, my lady. It's good to see some color in your cheeks again." She moved to a massive wardrobe and began selecting garments. "We should prepare you for the feast. The royal family does not appreciate tardiness." As Elena helped her dress in layers of silk and lace unfamiliar to someone accustomed to leather and linen, Rowan carefully extracted information. She learned that Diana had arrived at the palace 3 days ago, accompanying her mother from their family estate in the eastern provinces. The welcome feast tonight would be her first formal introduction to the court. Her mating ceremony with Prince Alexander was scheduled for the full moon, 2 weeks away. Most importantly, she learned that a diplomatic envoy had arrived from the Northern Territories yesterday, led by a man named Logan Blackwood, the same Logan who had betrayed her. Her Logan, here in the palace. Rowan's hands clenched into fists, crumpling the delicate fabric of her gown. Elena clicked her tongue disapprovingly, smoothing out the wrinkles. "Careful, my lady. This silk is worth more than I earn in a year." Rowan forced herself to relax. "Tell me about Prince Alexander," she said, redirecting both Elena's attention and her own murderous thoughts. Elena's expression softened. "The finest alpha in the kingdom, my lady. Strong but fair. Unlike his father, he treats all with respect, regardless of their status." She lowered her voice. "Some say he opposed the war against the rebels, though he would never speak such thoughts aloud." "Interesting." Rowan filed that information away. "And the king? What manner of man is Magnus?" Elena's hands stilled momentarily in their work. "It is not my place to speak of the king, my lady." "I am to be his daughter by marriage," Rowan pressed. "Surely I should know something of his character." Elena resumed her work, voice barely above a whisper. "He was not always as he is now. Years ago, before the Great War, he was known for his wisdom and compassion, but something changed him. The older servants speak of a darkness that came upon him suddenly. Some believe he is under a curse." A convenient excuse for tyranny, Rowan thought bitterly. But there was something in Elena's voice, a genuine fear that went beyond the usual caution of servants discussing their masters. "This curse," Rowan said carefully, "what form does it take?" Elena shook her head. "It is not spoken of directly, my lady, but on certain nights when the moon is dark, none are permitted near the king's chambers, and sometimes the screams can be heard throughout the palace." Before Rowan could question further, a bell sounded somewhere in the distance. Elena straightened, her momentary openness vanishing behind professional efficiency. "It is time, my lady. The court assembles for the feast." Rowan stood before the mirror once more, barely recognizing the elegant creature reflected there. The gown of midnight blue silk enhanced the porcelain quality of Diana's skin and the vibrant green of her eyes. Her hair had been arranged in an intricate style that somehow managed to look both sophisticated and effortless. Diamonds glittered at her throat and ears. For 23 years, Rowan had lived as a warrior. She had commanded respect through strength and skill. Now she stood adorned like a precious doll, expected to win approval through beauty and submission. She met her reflection's eyes and saw the steel behind them, the only part of this image that was truly hers. Whatever game Logan was playing, whatever magic had brought her here, she would find a way to turn it against him. She would discover his plan and destroy it. She would return to her own body, her own life, and she would make him pay for his betrayal. As Elena led her through the labyrinthine corridors of the palace, Rowan committed every turn to memory, noting guard positions and potential escape routes from habit. They passed numerous courtiers who nodded respectfully to Diana, some watching her with unconcealed curiosity. "Everyone's eager to see Prince Alexander's bride," Elena murmured. "You've caused quite a stir, my lady." At last, they reached a set of enormous doors, guarded by soldiers in the royal silver and black. Rowan's pulse quickened. Beyond those doors waited King Magnus, the man she had sworn to kill. And somewhere in that same room would be Logan, the traitor who had stolen her life. Elena squeezed her hand gently. "Breathe, my lady. Remember your training. Eyes downcast. Speak only when spoken to. The perfect Omega." Rowan squeezed back, perhaps harder than intended given Elena's wince. "Thank you for your guidance." The guards opened the doors, and a herald announced, "Lady Diana Victoria of the Eastern Provinces." Hundreds of faces turned toward her, nobles in their finery, servants bearing trays of food and wine, guards positioned strategically throughout the vast hall, and at the far end, seated on an elevated dais, the royal family. Rowan forced herself to move forward, to glide with the grace expected of Diana, rather than march with her natural warrior's stride. Her gaze swept the room, cataloging faces and positions, searching for Logan. She spotted him standing among a group of northern nobles, his golden hair unmistakable even in this unfamiliar setting. He wore formal attire instead of battle leathers, but his stance remained that of a fighter, ready for combat. His eyes met hers briefly across the crowded hall, showing not a flicker of recognition. "He doesn't know," Rowan realized. "He has no idea his ritual worked, that I am here." The thought gave her a surge of fierce satisfaction. She had the element of surprise, a weapon more valuable than any blade. Her attention turned to the dais where King Magnus sat watching her approach. The stories had not exaggerated his imposing presence, tall and broad-shouldered despite his years, with silver streaking his dark hair and beard. His face might once have been handsome, but now seemed carved from granite, harsh and unyielding. His eyes, however, were what caught Rowan's attention. Dark and haunted, with something lurking behind them that sent a chill down her spine. Beside him sat a younger man who could only be Prince Alexander. The resemblance to his father was clear, but where Magnus radiated cold authority, Alexander exuded controlled power. His features were sharper, more defined, with none of the weathering that age had brought to his father. Dark hair swept back from a strong forehead, a jawline that could have been chiseled from marble, and eyes of such intense blue they seemed to pierce through pretense. Those eyes fixed on Rowan now, studying her with unsettling intensity. She reached the foot of the dais and executed a perfect curtsy, the movement coming from Diana's muscle memory rather than her own will. "Your Majesty, Your Highness, I am honored by your welcome." Magnus nodded acknowledgement, his expression revealing nothing. "Rise, Lady Diana. We have heard much of your beauty and grace. I see the reports were not exaggerated." Rowan straightened, keeping her eyes appropriately lowered as Elena had instructed. The position made her skin crawl. In her real body, she had never lowered her gaze to anyone. "We hope your quarters are satisfactory," Magnus continued, his voice deep and resonant. Your comfort during your stay is of great importance to us." "The accommodations are most generous, Your Majesty," Rowan replied, measuring each word carefully. "I am grateful for your hospitality." Alexander had yet to speak, but Rowan could feel his gaze like a physical touch. When she risked a glance upward, she found him watching her with a slight furrow between his brows, as if trying to solve a puzzle. "My son has been eager for your arrival," Magnus said, gesturing to Alexander. "Perhaps unusually so, given that royal marriages are typically matters of politics rather than preference, but it seems your reputation precedes you." Alexander finally spoke, his voice deeper than his father's, and strangely resonant. "Father exaggerates my eagerness," he said, a hint of challenge in his tone. "But I do welcome you to our home, Lady Diana." There was something in the way he said it, a subtle emphasis suggesting he knew exactly how unwelcome she might feel. Rowan met his gaze directly, protocol forgotten. For an instant, surprise flickered in those blue eyes, quickly masked by practiced neutrality. "Thank you, Your Highness," she responded. "I look forward to becoming better acquainted." The double meaning wasn't lost on Alexander. His mouth curved slightly at one corner, not quite a smile, but an acknowledgement of the verbal sparring. "As do I, Lady Diana. As do I." Magnus rose from his throne, effectively ending the exchange. "Let the feast begin," he announced to the assembled court. "Tonight, we celebrate the upcoming union of our houses and the strength it will bring to the realm." Servants immediately sprang into action, bringing forth platters of food and filling goblets with wine. Alexander descended from the dais to escort Rowan to her seat at the high table. When his hand touched her arm, she fought the instinct to flinch away from an enemy's touch. "You're not what I expected," he murmured, guiding her through the crowd. "What did you expect, Your Highness?" Rowan countered. "The reports described you as timid, docile, barely able to maintain eye contact with alphas." His voice held no accusation, merely curiosity. "Yet you look at me as if assessing an opponent." Dangerous territory. Rowan softened her expression, channeling what she imagined Diana might have been like. "Perhaps I simply find you less intimidating than reports suggested, Your Highness." Alexander actually laughed at that, the sound rich and unexpected. "Careful, Lady Diana. Few at court would dare speak to me with such honesty." "Would you prefer I lie?" Rowan asked. His expression turned thoughtful. "No," he said after a moment. "I find I prefer honesty, however uncomfortable. A rare commodity in these halls." They reached the high table, and Alexander held her chair with surprising courtesy. As she took her seat, Rowan caught sight of Logan watching them from across the hall, his expression unreadable. Lady Victoria, seated further down the table, was staring at her with thinly veiled horror at her informal exchange with the prince. Throughout the elaborate meal, Rowan navigated the unfamiliar terrain of court etiquette, relying on Diana's ingrained manners when her own instincts failed her. She sipped wine sparingly, needing her wits about her in this den of enemies. Alexander, seated beside her, maintained a stream of surprisingly easy conversation, pointing out various courtiers and sharing observations that occasionally bordered on irreverent. "Lord Blackwood seems quite interested in you," Alexander noted casually at one point, gesturing subtly toward Logan. "He can hardly keep his eyes away." Rowan's hand tightened around her goblet. "Lord Blackwood? From the Northern Territories?" Alexander nodded. "A recent addition to court. Arrived yesterday as an envoy from the northern houses. Father seems to favor him, though I find his sudden appearance convenient." "Convenient how?" Rowan asked, seizing the opportunity to learn more. Alexander studied her with renewed interest. Most ladies would change the subject to something more appropriate for dinner conversation. Politics rarely interests Omega nobles. "I am not most ladies," Rowan replied before she could stop herself. His eyes darkened appreciatively. "No," he agreed. "You are certainly not." He leaned closer, voice dropping. "Lord Blackwood arrived with information about rebel movements, specifically about the notorious rebel leader known as the Demon Wolf." Rowan forced herself to remain impassive, though her heart hammered in her chest. "I've heard stories," she said carefully. "A fearsome warrior, they say." The most wanted criminal in the kingdom, Alexander confirmed. Responsible for countless raids and attacks on royal holdings. Lord Blackwood claims to have finally eliminated this threat. Eliminated? Rowan fought to keep her voice steady. You mean killed? Alexander's eyes never left her face. According to Blackwood, yes, though the body has not been recovered. He paused, watching her reaction. Does talk of such violence disturb you, Lady Diana? Death is a natural part of life, Rowan answered. Even violent death. The court's delicacy on such matters seems artificial. Alexander's eyebrows rose. You continue to surprise me. Most Omegas would swoon at such conversation. Perhaps you've been keeping company with the wrong Omegas, Your Highness. A genuine smile transformed his face, softening the harsh lines and illuminating his eyes. Perhaps I have. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of forced pleasantries and careful observation. Rowan catalogued every exit, every guard position, every potential ally or threat. Most importantly, she watched Logan, who maintained his distance, but observed her with unsettling intensity. When the feast finally concluded, Alexander escorted her back to the entrance of the ladies' wing. Away from the scrutiny of the court, his demeanor shifted subtly, becoming less formal. You've caused quite a stir tonight, he noted. The court expected a traditional Omega bride. Instead, they got a disappointment, Rowan suggested. An enigma, he corrected. One I find myself increasingly curious to solve. The way he looked at her sent an unexpected warmth through Rowan's borrowed body. Diana's physical response to the attractive alpha, she told herself firmly. Nothing to do with her own feelings. I'm not a puzzle to be solved, Your Highness, she said, pulling away slightly. Alexander, he corrected. When we're alone, at least. We're hardly alone in a palace corridor. His smile returned, gentler this time. True enough, but I hope we might find truly private moments in the coming days. I would know the real Diana, not the performance you give for the court. If only he knew how accurate his words were. The irony nearly made Rowan laugh aloud. Instead, she offered a non-committal nod. Good night, Your Highness. Alexander, he insisted quietly. Rowan hesitated, then relented. Good night, Alexander. His expression softened further. Good night, Diana. Sleep well. As she watched him walk away, Rowan was struck by the complexity of her situation. In the span of a single day, she had gone from fighting the royal family to dining at their table, from planning Alexander's death to conversing with him as his future mate, from certainty about her enemies to confusion about her path forward. But one thing remained clear. Logan had betrayed her for a reason. He had sent her soul into Diana's body with some greater purpose in mind, and whatever that purpose was, Rowan was determined to uncover it before he could succeed. She would adapt. She would survive. She would find a way back to her body, her life, her cause. And when she did, Logan would pay for every moment of this strange imprisonment. Elena was waiting in Diana's chambers, ready to help her prepare for bed. As the maid unlaced the elaborate gown, Rowan broke the silence. Tell me about Lord Blackwood, she said casually, the envoy from the north. Elena's hands paused momentarily. I know little of him, my lady. He arrived only yesterday. The servants say he brings news of a great victory against the rebels. What manner of man does he seem to be? Elena considered the question as she continued her work. Handsome, certainly. Charming when he wishes to be. But there's something in his eyes that makes the servants uneasy. A coldness. She helped Rowan step out of the heavy gown. Why do you ask, my lady? Did he catch your attention at the feast? In a manner of speaking, Rowan replied. I simply like to know who surrounds me in this new place. Elena nodded approvingly. Wise, my lady. The court is a dangerous place for the unwary. Once alone in the vast bed, surrounded by luxury that felt alien after years of hard living, Rowan stared into the darkness. The day's events swirled in her mind like leaves caught in a whirlwind. Diana's body, Logan's betrayal, Alexander's unexpected complexity, Magnus's haunted eyes, and beneath it all, a growing sense that she had been thrust into the center of something far larger and more dangerous than she had imagined. The pieces were there, but the pattern remained elusive. As exhaustion finally pulled her toward sleep, Rowan's last conscious thought was a promise to herself. She would not be a pawn in Logan's game. She would rewrite the rules. And in the end, she would emerge victorious, not as Diana, the perfect Omega bride, but as Rowan, the warrior who had never been defeated, not even by death itself. Dreams came to Rowan that night, fragments of memories that were not her own. Diana walking through gilded hallways, always with eyes lowered. Diana enduring snide remarks from court ladies, powerless to respond. Diana standing on a balcony, staring at the ground far below, wondering if death might be preferable to the life mapped out for her. Rowan woke with the taste of despair still bitter in her mouth. Sunlight streamed through the enormous windows, casting patterns across the silk bedding. For a moment, disorientation gripped her. Then reality crashed back. She was still trapped in Diana's body, still in the palace of her sworn enemy, still surrounded by danger on all sides. A knock at the door preceded Elena's entrance, the maid carrying a breakfast tray laden with delicacies Rowan had only heard described in stories: fresh fruits, pastries, smoked meats, and a pot of fragrant tea. "Good morning, my lady," Elena said cheerfully. "I hope you slept well after the excitement of last night. Today marks your second day at court. Only 2 more days until the ceremonial presentation." Rowan pushed herself upright, still marveling at how different this body felt. Lighter, softer, weaker. "Well enough," she replied. "What's on the schedule for today?" Elena arranged the tray across Rowan's lap with practiced efficiency. "Lady Victoria requested your presence in her chambers at midday. Something about preliminary preparations for the full moon ceremony." She hesitated, then added, "And Prince Alexander has invited you to join him for a ride through the royal gardens this afternoon." Rowan nearly choked on a bite of pastry. "A ride? As in horseback?" Elena nodded, puzzled. "Is that a problem, my lady? You've always loved riding." Rowan had ridden horses before, of course, but military style. Not whatever elegant side-saddle nonsense would be expected of Diana. Another challenge to navigate. "No problem," she lied, just surprised at the invitation. Elena smiled knowingly. "The prince seemed quite taken with you at the feast. It's caused quite a stir among the ladies of the court. Lady Isabel is particularly displeased." "Lady Isabel?" "The niece of Lord Blackwood. Before your arrival, it was widely believed she would become the prince's chosen mate." Elena's voice dropped to a whisper. "They've been intimate for some time, though the king never approved the match. Her bloodline lacks the necessary strength for a royal alliance." "Interesting. Logan's niece. Another connection to unravel." Rowan filed the information away for later use. "And what of Lord Blackwood himself?" she asked casually. "I noticed him watching me at the feast." Elena shrugged. "He arrived only recently. Some say he brings important information about the rebels. Others say he seeks a position on the royal council." She gathered up Rowan's nightclothes. "The strangest thing is how quickly he's gained the king's favor. Some servants whisper that he's been appointed as some kind of special advisor on ancient magic. The position hasn't existed in generations." This was new information. Logan moving closer to the king, positioning himself in a role connected to magic. His plans were clearly advancing quickly. "Would you like me to help you dress now, my lady?" Elena asked. Rowan eyed the elaborate gowns hanging in the open wardrobe with trepidation. "Something simple, if such a thing exists in this collection, and suitable for riding." As Elena selected garments, Rowan considered her next moves. Her instinct was to find Logan immediately, confront him, force answers. But that would be reckless. She had the advantage of her hidden identity. Better to observe, gather information, identify potential allies and enemies before revealing her hand. Prince Alexander's invitation provided an opportunity. He was the son of her enemy, yes, but also a potential source of information. And if Elena's assessment was accurate, he might already be inclined to look favorably upon Diana. After breakfast, Rowan spent the morning exploring the palace, memorizing corridors and exits, identifying guard rotations, and locating strategic points. Diana's status as the prince's betrothed granted her freedom of movement that would have been unimaginable for a rebel infiltrator. No one questioned her presence, though many watched her with undisguised curiosity. The palace itself was a marvel of ancient stonework and modern luxury, soaring ceilings, intricate tapestries, art and artifacts from throughout the kingdom's long history. In another life, Rowan might have appreciated its beauty. Now, she saw only a monument built on the suffering of her people. She encountered Logan once from a distance. He was deep in conversation with King Magnus himself, both men examining what appeared to be an ancient scroll. The king looked animated, more engaged than he had appeared at the feast. Logan nodded deferentially, but there was a gleam of satisfaction in his eyes that Rowan recognized all too well. He was gaining the king's trust, piece by calculated piece. Rowan ducked behind a column before Logan could notice her, heart pounding. Not yet. She wasn't ready to face him yet. At midday, she reluctantly made her way to Lady Victoria's chambers, steeling herself for another encounter with Diana's formidable mother. The woman was waiting, surrounded by dressmakers and jewelers displaying their wares. "Diana," Lady Victoria greeted, her tone considerably warmer than during their previous encounter. "Come in, darling. We have much to accomplish before the ceremonial presentation." Rowan entered cautiously, nodding to the assembled merchants. "Mother," she acknowledged, the term foreign on her tongue. Lady Victoria dismissed the others with a wave of her hand. When the door closed behind them, she turned to Rowan with a calculating expression. "Your performance at the feast was unexpected," she said. "I had feared your recent melancholy would make you appear weak before the court. Instead, you showed spirit. The prince seemed quite intrigued." "I aim to please," Rowan replied dryly. Lady Victoria's eyes narrowed slightly. "Indeed, though I would caution against too much spirit. The prince may find it refreshing now, but Alexander has a temper when crossed, like his father. I'll keep that in mind. See that you do?" Lady Victoria moved to a sideboard and poured 2 glasses of wine, offering one to Rowan. "The ceremonial presentation is in 2 days, on the full moon. It's the formal acknowledgement of your betrothal before the entire court and visiting dignitaries. Every eye will be watching, every tongue ready to report any misstep." Rowan accepted the wine but didn't drink. "What exactly is expected of me?" "You'll be presented to the king and prince under the full moon. You'll recite the traditional vows of submission and loyalty to both the crown and your future mate." Lady Victoria sipped her wine. "Then Alexander will present you with the royal mating token, signifying his intention to claim you at the next moon." Submission, loyalty, claim. The words turned Rowan's stomach. She had spent her life fighting against subjugation, and now she was expected to embrace it willingly. "And if I were to refuse?" she asked quietly. Lady Victoria's composure cracked just for an instant, revealing genuine fear beneath. "That is not an option, Diana. The alliance between our houses is crucial to our family's survival. Your father's debts have left us vulnerable. Without this match, we would lose everything." Rowan hadn't considered that aspect of Diana's situation. The girl had been a pawn in her family's political machinations, just as Rowan was now a pawn in Logan's mysterious game. "I understand," she said, meaning it more than Lady Victoria could know. "Good." The older woman visibly relaxed. "Now, about your riding excursion with the prince this afternoon. It's an excellent opportunity to secure his interest. Men appreciate women who share their passions, so be enthusiastic about the hunt, even if it bores you to tears." She smiled thinly. "And do try not to fall off your horse this time." After enduring an hour of Lady Victoria's detailed instructions on proper comportment, Rowan escaped to Diana's chambers to prepare for the afternoon ride. Elena had laid out riding attire, soft leather breeches, a silk blouse, and a fitted jacket in deep green that complemented Diana's eyes. The ensemble was both elegant and practical, more to Rowan's taste than the elaborate gowns she'd been shown earlier. As she dressed, Rowan contemplated her growing understanding of Diana's life. The girl had been trapped in a gilded cage, valued only for her bloodline and potential as a royal mate. Her suicide had been an act of desperate rebellion against a future she couldn't control. Rowan felt an unexpected kinship with the girl whose body she now inhabited. They had both been fighting the same system, just from opposite ends. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Elena entered, looking flustered. "My lady, Prince Alexander has arrived early. He awaits you in the western courtyard." Rowan nodded, hastily pulling on the riding boots Elena held out. "How do I get there from here?" Elena gave directions, then added hesitantly, "My lady, forgive my presumption, but you seem different since your arrival." Rowan froze in the act of adjusting her jacket. "Different how?" "Stronger," Elena said after a moment's consideration. "More present. Before you seemed to fade away sometimes, as if you were barely here at all." She fidgeted with the hem of her apron. "It's not my place to comment, but I prefer this version of you." The observation caught Rowan off guard. "Thank you, Elena," she said finally. "Your honesty is refreshing." The maid bobbed a quick curtsy. "Just be careful, my lady. The court doesn't always reward honesty." Rowan found Alexander waiting beside two magnificent horses in the western courtyard. He wore riding clothes that managed to be both practical and regal. Dark leather breeches, a fitted white shirt, and a navy jacket emblazoned with the royal insignia. His dark hair was slightly tousled by the breeze, making him appear younger and more approachable than he had at the formal feast. He turned at her approach, and something in his expression made Rowan's breath catch. It wasn't just appreciation for Diana's beauty. There was genuine pleasure at seeing her, as if her company specifically was something he valued. "Lady Diana," he greeted, bowing slightly. "You look lovely. I hope you don't mind that I arrived early. I was eager to escape my morning meetings." "Not at all, Your Highness," Rowan replied, studying the horses with a critical eye. Both were clearly high-bred, powerful animals, though the chestnut mare prepared for her seemed gentle enough. "Alexander," he corrected with a smile. "Remember our agreement?" He gestured to the horses. "I've brought Ember for you. She's spirited but responsive. I thought you might prefer her to the more sedate mares the ladies usually ride." Rowan approached the chestnut mare, allowing the horse to catch her scent. Ember nickered softly, seeming to accept her despite the unfamiliar rider in a familiar body. "She's beautiful," Rowan said truthfully. "Thank you for not assuming I needed a docile mount." Alexander's eyebrows rose slightly. "Your mother mentioned you're an accomplished rider, though she did caution me to choose a gentle horse, as you've apparently had some recent mishaps." Of course, Diana would have struggled with riding. Omega nobles were rarely encouraged to develop physical skills beyond what was decorative. "My mother worries too much," Rowan replied smoothly. "I assure you, I can manage Ember." Alexander helped her mount, his hands strong and sure at her waist. Rowan settled into the saddle with the ease of someone who had spent years on horseback, immediately finding her balance and taking up the reins confidently. If Alexander noticed that her seat was more warrior than noblewoman, he didn't comment. They rode through this palace grounds at a leisurely pace, Alexander pointing out features of interest. Gardens bursting with late summer blooms, ancient statues commemorating long-dead heroes, fountains that sparkled in the afternoon sunlight. Rowan noted it all while simultaneously assessing the military aspects, guard positions, wall heights, potential weaknesses in the perimeter. "You're very observant," Alexander commented, after she asked a particularly detailed question about the Eastern Watchtower. "Most visitors are content to admire the roses." Rowan realized her mistake too late. A proper Omega noble would focus on the aesthetic beauty, not the defensive capabilities. "I find architecture fascinating," she improvised, "the way beauty and function can coexist." Alexander seemed to accept this, an unusual interest for a lady of the eastern provinces. "Perhaps I'm an unusual lady." His laugh was unexpected and warm. "That much was clear from our first meeting. You're not what I expected, Diana." "Is that disappointment I hear?" she challenged. "Quite the opposite." He guided his stallion closer to her mare. "I've spent my life surrounded by people who say what they think I want to hear. Your directness is refreshing." They had reached the edge of a small forest that bordered the palace grounds. Alexander gestured toward a path that led deeper among the ancient trees. "The Royal Hunting Preserve," he explained, "some of the oldest growth in the kingdom. Would you like to see it?" Rowan hesitated. The forest offered both opportunity and risk. Privacy for honest conversation, but also isolation if Alexander proved less honorable than he appeared. "Lead the way," she decided, curiosity winning out over caution. The forest embraced them, sunlight filtering through the canopy in dappled patterns. The path narrowed, forcing them to ride single file, Alexander leading. Rowan studied him from behind, noting the straight set of his shoulders, the easy confidence of his posture. He rode like a man accustomed to command, but not arrogance, a quality rare among alpha nobles in her experience. Eventually, the path opened into a small clearing beside a stream. Alexander dismounted and helped Rowan do the same, though she hardly needed assistance. He tethered both horses where they could drink from the clear water. "This is one of my favorite places," he said, gesturing to a fallen log that served as a natural bench. "Few at court know of it." Rowan sat beside him, maintaining a proper distance. "Why show it to me, then?" Alexander considered the question seriously. Because you seem like someone who would appreciate solitude. The court can be overwhelming. Especially for an Omega from the provinces, she guessed. For anyone with a genuine soul, he corrected. The constant performance exhausts me, and I've been trained for it since birth. There was such honest weariness in his voice that Rowan felt an unexpected pang of sympathy. The prince might be her enemy by circumstance, but he was also a man trapped by expectations, just as Diana had been. "Why agree to this match, then?" she asked. Surely the crown prince could choose his own mate. Alexander's expression darkened slightly. "In theory, perhaps. In practice, royal marriages serve political purposes first. My father has final approval over any match." "And he approved me? An Omega from a financially troubled noble house?" His gaze sharpened with interest. "How do you know your family's financial situation? Such matters are usually kept from unmarried daughters." Rowan cursed inwardly at the slip. "Servants talk," she recovered smoothly, "and I listen." Alexander's mouth quirked. "Another unusual quality. Most nobles pretend servants are furniture. A foolish practice. Those who serve see everything." "Indeed they do." Alexander plucked a blade of grass, twirling it between his fingers. "To answer your question, your lineage is more valuable than your family's current finances. Your mother's bloodline traces back to the ancient houses, before the Great War. Such connections are increasingly rare." Rowan filed this information away. Diana's heritage clearly held significance beyond what she'd initially understood. "And what of Lady Isabel?" she asked boldly. "I understand you two were close before my arrival." Alexander's surprise was evident. "Court gossip travels quickly," he remarked dryly. "Isabel and I have a history, yes, but her family connections make her unsuitable as a royal mate. The king would never approve." "Even though her uncle now enjoys the king's favor?" Alexander's expression sharpened again. "You've been paying close attention to court politics for someone who arrived only days ago." Rowan realized she needed to be more careful. Diana would not have had access to such observations yet. "As I said, servants talk, and Lord Blackwood makes quite an impression." "That he does," Alexander agreed, his tone neutral but his eyes watchful. "He arrived barely a week ago, yet already serves as my father's special advisor on ancient magic and prophecies. An unusual position that hasn't existed in generations." "You sound concerned by this development." Alexander hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. "My father has episodes. Since my mother's death when I was born, he has suffered from what the royal physicians call the dark rage. It's a condition that sometimes affects alphas who lose their true mates." This was new information, something the rebels had never known about the king. "How does it manifest?" Rowan asked. "Periods of uncontrollable fury. Times when he's not himself. When he becomes something darker, more primal." Alexander's voice lowered. "The condition has worsened in recent years. Blackwood claims to have found ancient texts that speak of a cure." "And your father believes him?" "My father is desperate enough to believe anyone who offers hope. Blackwood speaks of ancient bloodlines with healing abilities, of prophecies, and lunar magic." Alexander's mouth tightened. "What troubles me is how quickly Blackwood gained access to our most guarded archives, and how he seems to know exactly which text to consult." Rowan felt a chill run down her spine. "Do you trust him?" Alexander studied her face. "No, and neither should you, Diana. There's something calculating in the way he watches you, as if you're a piece in some larger game." If only Alexander knew how accurate his assessment was. "What game could that possibly be?" she asked carefully. "I don't know, but it involves the ceremony 2 nights from now, on the full moon. Blackwood has convinced my father to incorporate ancient rituals into what should have been a simple presentation." He reached out, surprising Rowan by taking her hand. "Whatever happens, know that my primary concern is your safety. I may be the crown prince, but I don't share my father's obsession with ancient prophecies." The sincerity in his voice caught Rowan off guard. This was not the entitled royal heir she had expected. Alexander genuinely seemed concerned for Diana's well-being, despite barely knowing her. "Thank you," she said, meaning it. "Your concern is unexpected." "Is it?" A faint smile played at his lips. "Perhaps I've fallen under your spell already, Lady Diana." The conversation shifted to lighter topics as they rode back toward the palace. Alexander proved to be knowledgeable about subjects that surprised Rowan: literature, history, even the economic conditions in the outer provinces. He spoke of reforms he hoped to implement when he became king, including better conditions for the lower classes. If these were merely pretty words to impress his betrothed, he delivered them with convincing sincerity. As they approached the palace, Alexander grew quieter, his expression closing off incrementally with each step closer to the court. Rowan recognized the transformation. She'd seen it countless times among her rebel fighters when they donned their battle faces before a raid. The prince was armoring himself for return to his public role. "Thank you for this afternoon," he said formally as they reached the stables. "I hope we can ride again tomorrow." Rowan curtsied, playing her own role. "The pleasure was mine, Your Highness." A flash of disappointment crossed his features at her use of his title. Then his royal mask settled firmly into place, and he bowed formally before escorting her back to the palace entrance. As Rowan made her way back to Diana's chambers, her mind whirled with new information and unsettling questions. Alexander was not the mindless tyrant's son she had expected. Logan was rapidly gaining influence over the king through ancient prophecies and promises of magical cures. And Diana's bloodline apparently held special significance. Most troubling of all was her own unexpected response to the prince. She had meant to manipulate him for information, to use his attraction to Diana for her own purposes. She hadn't expected to find him intelligent, thoughtful, or genuinely conflicted about his role. Such complexity made him harder to categorize as a simple enemy. Elena was waiting with a bath already drawn, the water steaming and scented with lavender. As Rowan sank into the hot water, the maid bustled about laying out a dinner gown. "How was your ride, my lady?" Elena asked, gathering up the riding clothes. "Educational," Rowan replied truthfully. "The prince seemed pleased when I saw him in the corridor just now. You must have made quite an impression." Rowan closed her eyes, letting the hot water ease muscles unaccustomed to side-saddle riding. "Tell me, Elena, what do you know of Lord Blackwood and Lady Isabel? I understand they're related." Elena's hand stilled. "It's not my place to gossip, my lady. It's not gossip I'm after, but understanding. I'd rather know what potential enemies await me here." The maid sighed. "Lady Isabel is Lord Blackwood's niece, though they seem unusually close. She was displeased when your betrothal was announced instead of hers." "Displeased enough to cause trouble?" "Perhaps." Elena hesitated. "They've been seen meeting privately several times since Lord Blackwood's appointment as the king's advisor, and there have been strange occurrences in the palace since their arrival." "What kind of occurrences?" "Guards reporting unusual shadows in the corridors at night, sounds coming from the old North Tower, which has been sealed for generations, and," she lowered her voice, "one of the archive keepers was found dead yesterday in a room that contained ancient texts about lunar bloodlines." Rowan sat up, suddenly alert. "Dead? How?" "Officially, he collapsed from heart failure, but the servants who found him say his eyes were pure white, as if he'd seen something so terrifying it bleached the color away." Elena shuddered. "And there was a strange symbol burned into the floor beside him." The information set alarm bells ringing in Rowan's mind. Logan was clearly moving faster than she had anticipated, eliminating obstacles to whatever ritual he had planned. "Thank you for your honesty, Elena. I value it greatly." After her bath, Rowan dressed for dinner in a simpler gown than the previous night's extravagance, deep burgundy silk that left her shoulders bare but was otherwise modest by court standards. She was learning to move in Diana's body with more confidence, to inhabit the role of noble Omega while maintaining her warrior's awareness. She had just finished her dinner, served in her chambers at her request, when a knock came at the door. Elena answered it, then turned with a surprised expression. "Lady Diana, you have a visitor. Lady Isabel Blackwood requests a moment of your time." Rowan straightened, instantly alert. "Show her in." The woman who entered radiated cold beauty and calculated poise, tall for an Omega, with white blonde hair arranged in an elaborate style and piercing blue eyes that assessed Rowan with unconcealed hostility. Her gown of midnight blue was cut to emphasize a figure more voluptuous than Diana's slender frame. "Lady Diana," she greeted, her voice melodious but chilled. "I hope I'm not interrupting your evening." Rowan rose, offering a slight bow of acknowledgement. "Lady Isabel, this is unexpected. I thought it time we became acquainted, given your position at court." Isabel glanced dismissively around the chamber. "I see they've given you the Eastern Suite. How appropriate for a provincial noble." Elena hovered uncertainly by the door until Rowan nodded permission for her to leave. When the door closed, Isabel's cordial mask slipped slightly. "Let's not pretend, shall we?" she said, moving to examine the trinkets on Diana's dressing table with calculated indifference. "You know who I am, what I was to Alexander before your arrival." Rowan maintained her composure. "The prince's former companion? Yes, I've heard." Isabel's laugh was brittle. "Such a delicate term for it. We were lovers, Lady Diana. For 2 years I shared his bed, his confidence, and his plans for the future. Yet here I am," Rowan countered, "with his father's blessing for the match." The other woman's eyes flashed dangerously. "A political arrangement, nothing more. Alexander may be obligated to mate with you, but his heart remains elsewhere. Is that why you've come, to stake your claim?" Isabel moved closer, her perfume heavy and cloying. "I've come to offer advice. Accept the mating for the political alliance it is. Produce the required heirs. But understand that Alexander will return to my bed once his duty is done. That is how things work at court." Rowan raised an eyebrow, channeling the cold authority she had used to command rebel fighters. "Is that what Lord Blackwood advised you to tell me?" The question clearly startled Isabel. "My uncle's affairs are none of your concern, yet he seems very concerned with mine." Rowan held the other woman's gaze steadily. "Strange, isn't it, how he arrived just before my betrothal was announced?" Uncertainty flickered in Isabel's eyes before her haughty mask fell back into place. "Politics makes for strange timing." "Of course," Rowan agreed with false sweetness, "as does his sudden interest in ancient lunar bloodlines, the very bloodline that apparently runs in my family." That hit a nerve. Isabel's composure cracked visibly. "You know nothing about what's happening here. Then enlighten me." Isabel seemed to battle with herself for a moment, then her expression hardened. "You think you're so special with your ancient heritage, but you're just a pawn, Diana. My uncle has plans that go far beyond a simple royal mating." "What plans?" Rowan pressed, sensing a potential source of information. Isabel's smile turned cruel. "Plans that will change everything. 2 nights from now, when the moon is full, the true power will reveal itself." She moved toward the door. "You should enjoy your brief moment in the spotlight while you can, Lady Diana. After the ceremony, you won't matter anymore." The implied threat hung in the air between them. Rowan smiled, letting a hint of the predator she truly was show through Diana's gentle features. "I appreciate your concern," she said softly, "but I should warn you, I'm quite good at surviving dangerous situations." Something in her tone made Isabel pause, her hand on the door latch. For a moment, uncertainty replaced hostility in her expression. Then she recovered, offering a cold smile. "We shall see, won't we?" With that, she departed, leaving a lingering cloud of expensive perfume and unspoken menace. Elena returned moments later, her face pinched with worry. "My lady, are you all right? Lady Isabel has a reputation for directness." "I'm fine," Rowan assured her, "but I'd like to know more about this ceremonial presentation. What exactly happens during the full moon ritual?" Elena looked troubled. "No one knows exactly. Lord Blackwood has convinced the king to revive ancient practices not seen in generations. The preparations are being kept unusually secretive." "What about the North Tower you mentioned? The sealed one with strange sounds?" "It's been closed for decades, my lady. Legend says it contains artifacts from before the Great War, when different powers ruled these lands." Elena's voice dropped to a whisper. "Some servants claim they've seen Lord Blackwood entering it late at night, carrying bundles and strange instruments." Rowan processed this information, pieces of the puzzle beginning to align. Logan was clearly preparing something significant for the full moon ceremony, something connected to Diana's bloodline and ancient powers. "Thank you, Elena. You've been very helpful." After Elena departed for the night, Rowan paced the chamber, mind racing. Logan was clearly involved in some larger scheme that involved both the royal family and Diana specifically. Isabel's threats suggested she might be part of whatever plan Logan had set in motion. A soft scratching at her door interrupted her thoughts. Cautiously, Rowan approached, calling out, "Who's there?" "A messenger, my lady," came a whispered response, "with an urgent delivery." Rowan opened the door a crack, hand poised to defend herself if necessary. A young boy stood there, perhaps 12 years old, dressed in simple servant's clothes. He held out a small package wrapped in cloth. "For Lady Diana," he said, then added in a whisper, "from the forest people. For your eyes only." Before Rowan could question him further, the boy darted away, disappearing around a corner with impressive speed. Rowan closed the door and carefully unwrapped the package. Inside was a small wooden box carved with symbols she recognized immediately, rebel markings, secret signs used by her people. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened the box. Within lay a simple leather cord bearing a small crystal pendant and a folded note. The handwriting was familiar. Mira, her second-in-command and closest friend among the rebels. "We know what happened," the note read. "The traitor's magic took you from us, but your body lives. The crystal will glow when he performs the ritual again, 2 days hence, under the full moon. Be ready. You are not forgotten, Commander." Rowan clutched the pendant, emotions surging through her. Her people knew she was alive, trapped in Diana's body. They had somehow tracked her here. And most importantly, Logan planned another ritual under the full moon, the same night as Diana's formal presentation to court. Whatever Logan's ultimate plan, it would culminate in 2 days. Rowan needed to discover his intentions before then, and for that, she needed more direct access to the palace's inner workings. As she tucked the rebel pendant into a hidden pocket of her nightgown, a plan began to form. Prince Alexander had shown unexpected trust during their afternoon together. Perhaps she could use that growing connection to gain the information she needed. The game was growing more complex, the stakes higher than she had imagined. But for the first time since waking in Diana's body, Rowan felt a surge of hope. She was not alone in this strange battle, and in 2 days' time, she would either reclaim her true self or stop Logan's scheme, whatever the cost. The mysteries were deepening. Diana's valuable bloodline, Logan's secret rituals, Alexander's surprising character, and beneath it all, the question that had haunted Rowan since waking in this body. Why had Logan chosen Diana specifically as her vessel? What connection existed between them that made this impossible magic work? Sleep came fitfully that night, filled with dreams of wolves running through moonlit forests, of ancient rituals performed in stone circles, and of a shadow that moved between worlds, wearing first Logan's face, then her own. The morning of her second day in the palace dawned with a strange energy in the air. Palace servants moved with heightened urgency, and even the guards seemed unusually alert. Rowan could sense the building anticipation for tomorrow night's ceremony. Elena arrived with breakfast, her expression tense. "There's to be a special council meeting today," she whispered as she set down the tray. Lord Blackwood convinced the king to review the ancient ceremonial protocols. Prince Alexander is expected to attend, along with the highest-ranking nobles. "Including my mother?" Rowan asked. Elena nodded. "Lady Victoria was summoned at first light. She left instructions that you are to remain in your chambers today to rest before tomorrow's presentation." "Perfect." With both Victoria and Alexander occupied, Rowan would have freedom to investigate further. "And what of Lord Blackwood? Will he be at this meeting as well?" "Yes, my lady. As the king's special advisor, he will lead much of the discussion." Elena hesitated. "There's something else. Last night, after Lady Isabel left, I saw her meeting with her uncle in the West Corridor. They argued briefly before noticing me. Lord Blackwood seemed displeased with her." "Interesting. Perhaps Isabel had revealed more to Rowan than Logan had intended." "Thank you for telling me, Elena. I may take a walk in the gardens later to clear my head before tomorrow's ceremony." Once alone, Rowan quickly dressed in the simplest gown available, one that would allow freedom of movement. She secured the crystal pendant around her neck and slipped a small knife, borrowed from the dinner service, into her sleeve. If she encountered Logan alone, she wanted some means of defense, even in Diana's weaker body. The palace corridors were quieter than usual, with many courtiers and officials attending the special council. Rowan made her way toward the north tower Elena had mentioned, moving with purposeful confidence so as not to attract suspicion. Anyone who saw her would assume Lady Diana was simply exploring her new home. The entrance to the north tower proved easy enough to find. A heavy wooden door at the end of a seldom-used corridor, secured with an impressive iron lock. What wasn't easy was the pair of guards stationed outside it. Rowan retreated around a corner, considering her options. Direct confrontation was impossible in Diana's body. Deception, perhaps? She could claim to be lost, create a distraction. Before she could decide, the sound of approaching footsteps forced her to slip into an alcove behind a large tapestry. Through a gap in the ancient fabric, she watched as Logan himself strode toward the tower door, accompanied by a stooped figure in scholarly robes. "The preparations are complete," the scholar was saying, "but I must emphasize again the dangers of this approach, my lord. The lunar bloodline was sealed for good reason. If the power is awakened without proper containment—" "I've taken all necessary precautions," Logan interrupted, his tone dismissive. "The circle is prepared. The artifacts are in place. All that remains is the vessel." "The Victoria girl," the scholar murmured. "Are you certain she carries sufficient lunar heritage? The bloodlines have been diluted over generations." Logan's smile sent a chill down Rowan's spine, even from her hiding place. "Oh, she carries more than enough. And with the warrior spirit already bound within her, the transfer will be seamless. The king will have his cure, briefly." The guards saluted as Logan approached, one stepping forward to unlock the heavy door. As it swung open, Rowan caught a glimpse of a spiral staircase ascending into darkness. "Remain at your post," Logan instructed the guards. "No one enters without my express permission, not even the king." The door closed behind Logan and the scholar, leaving the guards at attention outside. Rowan remained hidden, processing what she'd overheard. The vessel clearly referred to Diana, or rather, to Diana's body containing Rowan's spirit. Logan had planned this combination deliberately, binding Rowan's warrior spirit to Diana's lunar bloodline for some ritual that would supposedly cure the king's condition. But the scholar's concern and Logan's dismissive response suggested the ritual carried significant risks, and Logan's comment about the king having his cure briefly hinted at darker intentions. Rowan needed to see inside that tower to understand exactly what Logan was preparing, but with armed guards at the only entrance, direct access was impossible. She retreated silently, mind racing through alternatives. Perhaps there was another way in, a forgotten passage, a connecting room. Ancient castles often contained secret routes, especially to towers that might need to be defended or escaped from in times of siege. Returning to the main corridors, Rowan sought out an elderly servant she had noticed earlier, a man whose stooped posture and weathered face suggested decades of service in the palace. She found him polishing silver in a small antechamber off the main dining hall. "Excuse me," she said, adopting Diana's gentle demeanor. "I seem to have lost my way. I was hoping to find the old library archives." The servant looked up in surprise, then bowed awkwardly when he recognized her. "Lady Diana, the main archives are in the East Wing, my lady." "I was actually looking for the older records," Rowan improvised. "Someone mentioned architectural drawings of the original palace might be found in the northern section." The old man's rheumy eyes sharpened with interest. "You have an interest in the old structures, my lady? Few do these days." He glanced around, then lowered his voice. "The northern archives were sealed years ago, along with the tower, but there's a smaller collection in the undercroft beneath the eastern library. Some of the original palace plans might be found there." This was exactly the lead Rowan had hoped for. "The undercroft? How would I find that?" The servant described a series of corridors and a concealed door behind a particular bookcase. "Mind the dust, my lady. Few venture down there now." Rowan thanked him and made her way to the eastern library. The vast room stood mostly empty, with only a couple of scholarly types absorbed in their reading. Following the servant's directions, she located the specific bookcase and the hidden mechanism that revealed a narrow door. The stone stairs beyond descended steeply into darkness. Rowan borrowed a lamp from a nearby reading table and began her descent, careful to close the hidden door behind her. The undercroft smelled of ancient paper and neglect. Rows of shelves contained leather-bound volumes and rolled scrolls, their labels faded with age. Dust coated every surface, confirming the old servant's assertion that few visited this place. Rowan moved methodically through the shelves, searching for architectural drawings. She eventually found a section containing large rolled plans, carefully extracting and examining each until she located what she sought. Detailed drawings of the original palace structure, including the North Tower. The plans confirmed her suspicion. A secondary access point existed, a narrow passage connecting the tower's lowest level to a storage chamber adjacent to the kitchens. Originally designed as an escape route for the royal family, the passage had likely been forgotten over generations as the palace expanded and sections were sealed off. Rowan carefully noted the passage's location, then continued searching. If she was to counter Logan's plans, she needed to understand what ritual he intended to perform. Something connected to lunar bloodlines and ancient powers. In a section marked with symbols similar to those on her rebel pendant, Rowan discovered a thin volume bound in pale leather. The text inside was written in an archaic script, but she could make out illustrations of ceremonial circles, phases of the moon, and what appeared to be transfer rituals. One illustration in particular caught her attention: a triangular formation of 3 figures, connected by lines of power, with moonlight focusing on the central point. Notes in the margin, partially legible, spoke of vessel, power source, and conductor. The ceremony Logan was preparing for tomorrow night's full moon. As Rowan studied the text, trying to decipher its meaning, a sound from the stairs made her freeze. Someone was descending into the undercroft. She quickly extinguished her lamp and slipped between the shelves, concealing herself in the shadows. Footsteps approached, accompanied by the light of another lamp. Through gaps in the ancient shelving, Rowan saw Lady Victoria moving purposefully through the archive, headed directly for the section containing the lunar texts. What was Diana's mother doing here? According to Elena, she should be in the special council meeting with the king and Logan. Victoria went unerringly to the shelf where Rowan had found the ritual text, suggesting she knew exactly what she was looking for. She extracted the same volume Rowan had been examining, along with several others, and placed them in a satchel she carried. As Victoria turned to leave, her lamp illuminated her face, revealing an expression Rowan hadn't seen before. Not the calculated court mask or maternal strictness, but genuine fear tinged with determination. Whatever Victoria knew about tomorrow's ceremony, it clearly troubled her deeply. Rowan remained hidden until Victoria's footsteps receded up the stairs. This unexpected development suggested there was more to Diana's mother than she had initially assumed. Was Victoria working with Logan or against him? Did she understand what the ritual truly entailed? With these new questions adding to her growing list, Rowan waited several minutes before retrieving her lamp and making her own way back to the main library. She had discovered enough for now: the secret passage to the North Tower and confirmation that tomorrow night's ceremony involved some kind of power transfer using Diana as a vessel. Now she needed to prepare. Tomorrow night, under the full moon, she would either reclaim her own body or stop Logan's scheme entirely. Either way, she would need allies. Alexander had shown himself potentially trustworthy, and now Lady Victoria demonstrated she might have her own agenda separate from Logan's. As Rowan made her way back toward Diana's chambers, a plan began to form. She would need to speak with Alexander before the ceremony to warn him of potential danger. She would need to locate the secret passage entrance and ensure it remained accessible. And she would need to be ready for whatever ritual Logan had designed, with all its unknown dangers and consequences. The crystal pendant hung cool against her skin, a reminder that her rebel allies waited beyond the palace walls, ready to act if needed. For the first time since waking in Diana's body, Rowan felt a sense of purpose returning. She was done being a pawn in Logan's game. Tomorrow night, she would reclaim control of her fate, whatever form that might take. The day of the full moon ceremony arrived, bringing with it a palpable tension that seemed to vibrate through the very stones of the palace. Rowan woke before dawn, the crystal pendant against her skin already warming slightly, an early warning that preparations for Logan's ritual had begun. She stood at the window, watching as the first pale light crept across the palace gardens. Tonight would determine everything: her future, the kingdom's future. Perhaps even the fate of the ancient lunar bloodline that flowed through Diana's veins. Elena arrived with breakfast, her usually cheerful demeanor subdued. "The entire palace is in chaos," she reported, setting down the tray. "Additional guards have been posted throughout the grounds. Servants are preparing the grand ceremonial hall, and Lord Blackwood has been in private conference with the king since midnight." "And Lady Victoria?" Rowan asked, picking at the food without appetite. "She requested that you join her at midday for final preparations." Elena hesitated, then added in a near whisper, "She seemed different this morning. Frightened, perhaps, though trying not to show it." Not surprising, given what Rowan had witnessed in the archives yesterday. Victoria clearly knew more about tonight's ceremony than she had revealed. "What about Prince Alexander?" Rowan kept her tone casual, though her pulse quickened at the mention of his name. "The prince has been ordered to remain in seclusion until the ceremony. Ancient tradition, according to Lord Blackwood." Elena's expression suggested what she thought of that explanation. Though one of his personal guards mentioned he wished to see you before then, he left this. She produced a small, folded note, sealed with plain wax rather than the royal insignia, deliberately inconspicuous. Rowan broke the seal and read the brief message. Hunting Lodge, noon, come alone, trust no one. Rowan committed the words to memory before crumpling the paper and tossing it into the fireplace. She had suspected Alexander might prove an ally, but his caution confirmed her assessment that he, too, harbored suspicions about tonight's ceremony. Elena, she said carefully, I'll need to postpone my meeting with Lady Victoria. Perhaps you could inform her I'm observing pre-ceremonial meditation in preparation for tonight. The maid looked startled. She won't be pleased, my lady. Nevertheless, it's what I require. Rowan infused her voice with Diana's noble authority. And I'll need riding clothes prepared, immediately. Once dressed in the practical riding attire, Rowan secured the crystal pendant beneath her clothes and concealed a small knife in her boot. She'd spent the evening studying the palace layout, memorizing the quickest route to both the hunting lodge and the hidden passage to the North Tower. Whatever happened today, she would be prepared. Leaving through a side entrance to avoid notice, Rowan made her way to the royal stables. The groom seemed surprised by her unaccompanied arrival, but didn't question her when she requested Ember, the mare Alexander had chosen for her yesterday. The ride to the hunting lodge took nearly an hour, following a narrow trail that wound through increasingly dense forest. The small stone building stood in a clearing, smoke curling from its chimney. 2 horses were already tethered outside, Alexander's stallion and another she didn't recognize. Rowan approached cautiously, alert for any sign of a trap. Had Alexander's message been intercepted, altered, or was this truly the alliance she hoped for? She dismounted and secured Ember beside the other horses, then moved silently to the lodge's window, peering inside before announcing her presence. Alexander paced before a small fire, his expression tense. Across from him sat an older man Rowan didn't recognize, dressed in simple clothing that belied the authoritative way he gestured as they spoke. Taking a calculated risk, Rowan approached the door and knocked firmly. The conversation inside ceased immediately. The door swung open, revealing Alexander with sword half drawn. His expression shifted from wariness to relief when he saw her. "Diana, you came." "Your note was difficult to ignore," she replied, stepping past him into the warmth of the lodge. The older man rose, studying her with intelligent eyes set in a weathered face. Something about his assessing gaze reminded Rowan of her rebel commanders, a soldier's watchfulness. "Lady Diana," Alexander said formally, "may I present Marcus Vale, former royal archivist and my father's advisor before Lord Blackwood's arrival." The name triggered recognition. "The scholar who disappeared last month? The court believes you fled to avoid gambling debts." Marcus's laugh held no humor. "A convenient story spread by Blackwood after he discovered my investigation into his background and true intentions." He gestured for her to sit. "Please, my lady, we have much to discuss and little time." Alexander closed and barred the door, then joined them at the rough wooden table. "I apologize for the secrecy, but the palace is no longer safe for private conversations. Too many ears report to Blackwood." "You suspect him of something specific," Rowan stated rather than asked. Alexander and Marcus exchanged glances. "We know he's manipulating my father," Alexander replied, "using the king's condition and desperate hope for a cure to advance his own agenda." "Which is?" Rowan prompted. Marcus leaned forward. "Power. Ancient, terrible power that hasn't been seen in these lands for generations." He studied her face carefully. "Power connected to your bloodline, Lady Diana. The lunar heritage that flows through your veins." So they knew about Diana's ancestry, but did they know about Rowan's presence in Diana's body? About Logan's soul transfer magic? "What exactly is this lunar heritage?" she asked, testing their knowledge. "Your mother never told you?" Marcus seemed genuinely surprised. Before the Great War, before the current royal line, these lands were governed by the Luna Wolves, beings who drew power directly from the moon itself, not divided into alphas and omegas as we are today, but united in balance. Their abilities included healing wounded spirits and maintaining harmony between all wolf kinds. "What happened to them?" Rowan asked, though she was beginning to piece together the story from fragments gleaned throughout the palace. "They were systematically destroyed by the rising alpha houses, including the ancestors of the current royal line," Marcus explained. The Alphas saw the Luna Wolves' balanced power as a threat to their dominance. The survivors went into hiding, diluting their bloodlines through marriage with normal nobles, suppressing their abilities to avoid detection. And I am descended from these survivors. It wasn't a question. The last pure bloodline, Alexander confirmed, which is why Blackwood has manipulated events to place you at the center of tonight's ceremony. Rowan considered how much to reveal of what she knew. These men clearly opposed Logan, but did that make them true allies? The ceremony is more than a betrothal presentation, she said carefully. Blackwood has incorporated ancient rituals, but to what end? Marcus's expression darkened. The ritual he's designed serves multiple purposes. Ostensibly, it will awaken your latent lunar abilities to cure the king's dark rage, the condition that has affected him since the death of his true mate. But its true purpose, Rowan pressed. Power transfer, Alexander said grimly. Blackwood has discovered texts describing how Luna magic can be channeled through specific configurations of blood and moonlight. We believe he intends to use my father's alpha power, your lunar bloodline, and his own magical knowledge to create a transfer that will make him more powerful than any wolf in our history. The assessment aligned with what Rowan had pieced together, but didn't account for her presence in Diana's body. Why had Logan killed her, transferred her soul into Diana? What role did her warrior spirit play in his grand design? Before she could decide how much to reveal, Marcus spoke again. There's something else you should know, Lady Diana. Something that may explain Blackwood's specific interest in you beyond your bloodline. He produced a weathered scroll from within his cloak and unrolled it carefully on the table. The ancient text was mostly incomprehensible to Rowan, but the illustrations were clear enough. A ceremonial circle beneath a full moon, 3 figures forming a triangle, and streams of energy flowing between them. This ritual requires 3 elements, Marcus explained, pointing to each figure in turn. A power source, in this case the king's alpha energy. A vessel with lunar bloodline, you, and a conductor to channel and ultimately receive the combined power. Blackwood, Alexander supplied. But for the ritual to work properly, Marcus continued, the vessel must contain dual essences, the lunar bloodline and a warrior spirit. The texts are clear that without both elements in perfect balance, the transfer will fail. Rowan's blood ran cold. This explained everything. Why Logan had killed her, why he had transferred her soul into Diana's body. He needed both bloodlines in one vessel to make his ritual work. How do you know all this? She asked, buying time to think. I've spent decades studying the ancient texts, Marcus replied. When Blackwood arrived and began requesting specific scrolls about lunar magic and soul transference, I grew suspicious. I investigated his background and discovered he's no northern lord at all, but a practitioner of forbidden magic from beyond the eastern mountains. He was gathering the components for this ritual, Alexander added, and when he learned of your mother's lineage, he moved quickly to arrange our betrothal through my father. Rowan made a decision. These men were clearly enemies of Logan, and she needed allies for tonight's confrontation. There's something you should know, she said carefully, about me, about Diana. Both men leaned forward, expectant. I am not Diana Victoria, she stated simply. My name is Rowan. Until 3 days ago, I was commander of the rebel forces fighting against King Magnus's rule in the Eastern Territories. Shock registered on both faces. Alexander recovered first. What madness is this? Blackwood killed me, or thought he did, during a raid. He used some form of ancient magic to transfer my soul, my consciousness, into Diana's body. Rowan met Alexander's stunned gaze steadily. The real Diana took her own life the night of my death. Her body lived, but her soul had departed, creating the perfect vessel for Blackwood's ritual, lunar bloodline combined with warrior spirit. Silence filled the lodge as they absorbed this impossible claim. Marcus looked skeptical, but Alexander studied her face with new understanding. That explains the changes I noticed, he said slowly. Your confidence, your fighting stance, your knowledge of military defenses. You're not Diana at all. I inhabit her body, but no, I am not her. Rowan touched the crystal pendant beneath her clothing. My rebel allies know what happened. They've been tracking Blackwood since my disappearance. They sent me this. It will glow when Blackwood begins his ritual tonight. Marcus's skepticism gave way to scholarly interest. Soul transference. I've read theoretical texts, but never encountered a successful case. He looked at her with new respect. You've maintained your consciousness intact through the transfer? Remarkable. This changes everything, Alexander said, pacing again. If Blackwood has already performed one forbidden ritual successfully, he'll certainly complete the second unless we stop him, Rowan finished. Which is why I'm here. I need allies who understand what we're facing. Alexander stopped pacing and faced her directly. Why reveal yourself to us? How do you know we won't expose you? I am the prince, after all, son of the king you fought against for years. A fair question. Rowan met his gaze without flinching. Because in 3 days, you've shown more honor and genuine concern for your people than your father has in years of rule. Because Marcus clearly opposes Blackwood's manipulation of ancient power. And because, frankly, I have few alternatives. Alexander's expression softened slightly. You trusted me with your true identity. I won't betray that trust. He glanced at Marcus, who nodded agreement. So what do we do? Rowan asked. How do we stop the ritual? Marcus returned to the ancient scroll, pointing to specific markings. The transfer requires perfect alignment, king to vessel to conductor. If any element is disrupted at the critical moment when lunar power peaks, the ritual will fail. Disrupted how? Alexander asked. The simplest method would be to remove one participant entirely, Marcus said. But Blackwood will have guards, magical protections, and the king is unlikely to listen to warnings, given his desperation for a cure. What about redirecting the energy flow? Rowan suggested, remembering her studies of the ritual diagram. If I, as the vessel, could somehow channel the power away from Blackwood. Marcus looked thoughtful. Theoretically possible. The vessel does have some control over the direction of energy flow, but it would require tremendous willpower to override the ritual's designed pathways. Willpower I have in abundance, Rowan stated. Alexander moved to stand beside her, his proximity both comforting and distracting. You'll need an alternative destination for the power. If not Blackwood, then where or whom? The question hung in the air between them. Where indeed? Rowan considered the possibilities. Redirecting the power back to the king might intensify his condition rather than cure it. Attempting to send it into the ether could be dangerous or impossible given the ritual's constraints. What about you? She asked Alexander suddenly. You're of royal blood. You're an alpha. And you have no hidden agenda for the power. Alexander looked stunned. Me? Take on combined alpha and lunar magic? The effects are unknown, potentially devastating. Better you than Blackwood, Rowan pointed out. At least your intentions toward the kingdom are honorable. Marcus was already nodding. It could work. The bloodline connection between father and son would actually facilitate the transfer, and the prince's presence in the ceremonial circle would be expected as Diana's betrothed. Alexander ran a hand through his dark hair, visibly wrestling with the implications. What would such power do to me? Would I still be myself? A valid concern, and one Rowan couldn't answer with certainty. The texts speak of balance, she said. Lunar magic was meant to complement alpha strength, not corrupt it. In theory, the combination should create a more balanced ruler, strong but tempered by compassion. In theory, he repeated dryly. We have few options, Marcus reminded them. If Blackwood completes the ritual as designed, we face a tyrant with unprecedented power. At least with Alexander, there's hope for a better outcome. Alexander squared his shoulders, decision made. Very well. I'll position myself to intercept the power transfer. He turned to Rowan. But if you sense anything going wrong, any hint that the power might corrupt me as it has my father, you must stop the transfer immediately. Promise me that. His intensity caught her off guard. This was not the entitled prince she had expected when first waking in Diana's body. This was a man willing to risk himself to protect his kingdom, even from himself if necessary. I promise, she said solemnly. Now we need a concrete plan for tonight. For the next hour, they strategized. Marcus outlined the expected sequence of the ritual based on the ancient texts. Alexander described the ceremonial hall's layout and guard positions. Rowan contributed her observations of Logan's behavior patterns and likely safeguards. They agreed that Alexander would participate in the ceremony as expected, positioning himself strategically within the ritual circle. Rowan, as Diana, would be the central focus, using her dual nature to control the energy flow when the moment came. Marcus would remain hidden among the court observers, ready to create a distraction if needed. There's one more thing you should know, Rowan said, as they prepared to return to the palace separately. My rebel allies are positioned in the forest beyond the palace walls. If things go catastrophically wrong, they're prepared to intervene. Alexander's expression tightened. Armed rebels attacking during a royal ceremony would result in bloodshed on all sides. It's a last resort, Rowan assured him. But I thought you should know all the pieces in play. He nodded, accepting the information without further objection. We should return separately. Blackwood has spies everywhere, and our absences will be noticed soon if they haven't been already. As they stepped outside to retrieve their horses, Alexander suddenly touched Rowan's arm, stopping her. Wait, there's something I must ask before we part. She turned to face him, surprised by the conflict evident in his expression. If we succeed tonight, if we stop Blackwood and redirect the power, what then? Will you— He hesitated, searching for words. Will you remain as Diana, continue with the betrothal, or will you seek to return to your original body, to your former life? The question caught Rowan unprepared. She had been so focused on stopping Logan's ritual that she hadn't fully considered what might come after. Return to her rebel command? Remain in Diana's body as future Luna to the prince she had once sworn to defeat? Neither option felt entirely right. I don't know, she admitted honestly. My body still lives, according to my allies, but Diana's consciousness is gone. If I abandon this body, it becomes an empty shell, and yet remaining means living a life that was never mine. Alexander's gaze held hers, intense and searching. For what it's worth, I've come to respect the person you are. Rowan, in Diana's form. Your strength, your determination, your willingness to risk yourself for a greater purpose. His voice softened. I would not be displeased if you chose to stay. The admission hung between them, loaded with implications neither was ready to fully address. Rowan felt an unexpected warmth spread through her chest. Diana's physical response to Alexander's proximity, or something deeper from her own consciousness? First, we survive tonight, she said, deflecting the moment. Then we can consider impossible choices. He accepted the deflection with a nod, though his eyes held questions still. Until tonight, then. They mounted their horses and departed in different directions. Alexander directly back to the palace, Rowan taking a circuitous route that would allow her to approach from a less observed entrance. As she rode, Rowan's mind churned with tactical considerations, ritual diagrams, and contingency plans. But beneath it all ran an undercurrent of confusion about her own feelings. 3 days ago, Alexander had been the enemy prince, son of the tyrant she had sworn to overthrow. Now he was an ally, risking himself to stop Logan's power grab. And perhaps something more, something she wasn't ready to name. Focus on the mission, she reminded herself sternly. Personal complications could be sorted later, assuming they survived the night. When Rowan returned to the palace, she found Lady Victoria waiting in Diana's chambers, pacing with barely controlled agitation. The older woman rounded on her the moment she entered. "Where have you been?" Victoria demanded. "I sent Elena hours ago to bring you for preparations." "I needed time alone," Rowan replied calmly, "to center myself before tonight's ceremony." Victoria studied her face, suspicion warring with concern. "The ritual tonight is far more dangerous than you realize, Diana. Blackwood has convinced the king it will cure his condition, but the true purpose is much darker." So Victoria did know more than she had revealed. Rowan decided to test the waters. "You mean the power transfer? Using my lunar bloodline as a conduit?" Shock flashed across Victoria's features. When did you learn of this?" "I have my sources," Rowan replied, unwilling to reveal Alexander's involvement. "What matters is that we both understand the danger Blackwood presents. The question is, where do you stand in all this, Mother?" Victoria sank onto a nearby chair, suddenly looking older and wearier than Rowan had yet seen her. "I stand with my daughter, of course. I agreed to this betrothal to secure our family's position, yes, but I never agreed to Blackwood's manipulation of ancient powers. When I discovered his true intentions—" She trailed off, shaking her head. "You started investigating," Rowan finished for her. "I saw you in the archives yesterday, taking books about lunar rituals." Victoria's eyes widened. "You were there? How did you even know about the Undercroft archives?" "As I said, I have my sources." Rowan sat across from her, maintaining eye contact. "Are you willing to help stop Blackwood tonight?" Victoria hesitated only briefly. "Yes, but it won't be easy. He's taken precautions, positioned his allies throughout the ceremonial hall, and he has some hold over the king that goes beyond promises of a cure." "What kind of hold?" "I'm not certain, but Magnus has changed since Blackwood's arrival. Become more erratic, his episodes of rage more frequent and severe." Victoria's hands twisted in her lap. almost as if Blackwood is deliberately aggravating his condition rather than seeking to cure it. This added a new dimension to Rowan's understanding of the situation. Was Logan somehow influencing the king's mental state, making him more desperate and therefore more compliant? "Tonight, when the ritual begins," Rowan said carefully, "I'll need you to stay close to the ceremonial circle. If something goes wrong, if Blackwood realizes we're working against him, I may need a distraction." Victoria nodded, resolve hardening her features. "I'll be ready, but Diana—" She reached out, taking Rowan's hands in a grip surprisingly strong for an Omega. "The lunar power that will be awakened tonight is real. If it flows through you, even briefly, it may change you in ways we can't predict. The texts speak of awakened Luna wolves experiencing visions, enhanced abilities, even communion with past ancestors." Communion with past ancestors? Would that include Diana's consciousness, somehow still present within her own body? The possibility sent a chill through Rowan. "I'll be careful," she promised, extracting her hands gently. "Now, shouldn't we begin whatever preparations are necessary for tonight?" The remainder of the day passed in a flurry of ritual preparations. The ceremonial bath, infused with herbs and oils, said to enhance spiritual awareness. The elaborate dressing in layers of symbolic garments, a shift of pure white silk representing Diana's Omega purity, covered by a gown of midnight blue velvet embroidered with silver moons and stars, symbolizing her connection to lunar energies, a silver circlet set with moonstones to crown her head, ancient symbols painted on her hands and face with fragrant oils. Throughout it all, Rowan remained hyper-aware of the crystal pendant concealed beneath her ceremonial garments. She would have only one chance to counter Logan's ritual. Whether that meant redirecting the power to Alexander or stopping the transfer entirely, she still wasn't entirely certain. As twilight approached, Elena helped with the final adjustments to Rowan's appearance. The maid worked in uncharacteristic silence, her usual cheerful demeanor replaced by obvious worry. "Elena?" Rowan prompted gently. "What troubles you?" Elena's hands stilled on the ceremonial veil she had been arranging. "The palace feels wrong tonight, my lady. The guards are on edge. The servants whisper of strange sightings in the corridors. And Lord Blackwood—" She shuddered visibly. "He's been seen entering the ceremonial hall carrying objects draped in black cloth, objects that moved beneath the covering." The information sent a chill down Rowan's spine. Whatever ritual Logan had planned clearly involved elements beyond simple magical transference. "Thank you for telling me," Rowan said. "Your honesty has been invaluable since my arrival." Elena's eyes filled with unexpected tears. "Whatever happens tonight, my lady, know that you have been kinder to me than anyone in this palace. I pray for your safety." The genuine concern touched Rowan deeply. She had come to value Elena not just as a source of information, but as something approaching a friend, a concept nearly foreign to a warrior who had held herself apart from others for most of her life. "Elena, if anything happens to me tonight, seek out the palace gardens. A man named Jax works among the groundskeepers. Tell him I sent you. He will ensure your safety." Before Elena could question this strange instruction, Lady Victoria returned to announce it was time. As they made their way toward the ceremonial hall, Rowan felt the weight of the crystal pendant growing warmer against her skin. Logan's preparations were already underway. The great hall had been transformed for the ceremony. Hundreds of candles cast flickering light over assembled courtiers in their finest attire. An aisle of silver cloth led to the raised dais where the royal throne stood. Above, a massive skylight revealed the darkening sky, positioned so that the full moon would eventually shine directly onto the ceremonial circle marked on the floor before the thrones. King Magnus sat in regal splendor, his imposing figure enhanced by ceremonial armor polished to mirror brightness. Beside him, Prince Alexander stood in similar attire, though his expression betrayed tension invisible to any observer less attuned to body language than Rowan. And there, standing to the right of the thrones in ceremonial robes of midnight blue trimmed with silver, was Logan. No longer playing the role of Northern Lord, he now wore the regalia of a royal mage, his new position as the king's special advisor on ancient magics. As Lady Victoria escorted her down the silver aisle, Rowan noted other strategic positions. Royal guards stationed at each entrance, their hands resting on weapons. Court nobles arranged by rank and status, with those closest to the throne representing the most powerful houses. Lady Isabel among them, her beauty enhanced by an elaborate gown of silver that nonetheless paled beside Diana's ceremonial attire. And scattered throughout the hall, servants whose watchful gazes suggested they were more than they appeared. Palace staff loyal to Marcus, perhaps, or even rebel allies positioned by her people. When they reached the ceremonial circle, Lady Victoria formally presented her daughter to the king. The ritual words washed over Rowan as she maintained her focus on Logan, watching for any sign that the true ceremony, his magical ritual, had begun. The crystal pendant against her skin grew warmer still. She felt for Alexander's presence, sensing him moving into position beside her as the traditional betrothal presentation continued. Their eyes met briefly, a silent confirmation of their shared purpose. King Magnus rose from his throne, his deep voice silencing the hall. "Tonight, we gather not only to formalize a royal betrothal," he announced, "but to honor ancient traditions too long forgotten. Under the full moon, we invoke the original magic of our lands, the power of the Luna wolves, whose blood flows through Lady Diana's veins." A murmur swept through the assembled nobles. This departure from traditional ceremony clearly surprised many present. Alexander's expression had darkened further, his gaze fixed on Logan with poorly concealed hostility. Magnus continued, "Lord Blackwood, as royal mage, will guide us through the ancient rites of awakening so that the blessings of the Luna bloodline may once again strengthen our kingdom." This was it, the beginning of Logan's true ritual. As he stepped forward into the ceremonial circle, the pendant against Rowan's skin became almost painfully hot. Logan's eyes met hers across the circle, and for an instant, Rowan saw recognition flicker there. Not for Diana, but for her true self. He knew. Somehow he had realized her consciousness remained intact within Diana's form. His smile held triumph as he raised his hands to begin the ritual. "Under the full moon, we call upon the ancient powers, blood of the royal line, blood of the Luna wolves, spirit of the warrior, unite in sacred purpose." As Logan's chant continued, moonlight poured through the skylight, illuminating the ceremonial circle with silver radiance. Rowan felt something stir within Diana's body, a power long dormant, responding to the ritual words and the moonlight's touch. Alexander stepped forward as directed by the ceremony, taking his place opposite Rowan in the circle. His eyes sought hers, conveying a silent message of reassurance. Whatever happened, he would stand with her. Magnus joined them, completing the triangle formation. Logan moved to the center, producing a ceremonial dagger that gleamed unnaturally in the moonlight. "With blood we bind," he intoned, taking Magnus's hand and drawing the blade across his palm. The king didn't flinch as crimson liquid welled from the cut. Logan repeated the action with Alexander, who submitted with obvious reluctance. Then he turned to Rowan, dagger extended. "Blood of the Luna wolves," he murmured as he took her hand, "awakened at last." The blade bit into Diana's palm, sharper than its appearance suggested. Rowan felt the sting, but something else accompanied it, a surge of energy unlike anything she had experienced before. Diana's dormant power, responding to blood and moonlight and ritual words. Logan directed them to press their bleeding palms together at the center of the circle, king to prince to Diana, forming a triangle of blood and power. As their hands connected, Rowan felt energy pulsing between them, growing stronger with each heartbeat. "The circle is formed," Logan declared. "Now witness the awakening." He began chanting in an ancient language Rowan didn't recognize. The words seemed to vibrate in the air, physical things with weight and substance. The moonlight intensified, focusing directly on their joined hands. Through their connected hands, she sensed Alexander's determination and concern, Magnus's desperate hope, and beneath it all, Logan's triumphant anticipation. The chanting reached a crescendo, and Logan produced a final element, a small obsidian box carved with symbols matching those on the ritual dagger. When he opened it, a wisp of darkness emerged, coiling like smoke in the moonlight. "Spirit of the warrior," Logan intoned, "bound by ancient magic, complete the trinity of power." With horrifying clarity, Rowan realized what the box contained, a fragment of her own soul, extracted during her death in the forest. The missing piece that would complete Logan's ritual by connecting Diana's awakening powers to her own warrior spirit, creating the perfect conduit for the transfer of the king's alpha power to Logan himself. As the dark essence floated toward the joined hands at the circle's center, Rowan locked eyes with Alexander. Now was the moment of decision. She concentrated on their shared blood connection, visualizing the path she wanted the energy to follow, from king to Diana to prince, bypassing Logan entirely. The soul fragment connected with their joined hands, creating a blinding flash of silver-blue light. Energy surged through the blood bond, but instead of flowing to Logan as he had planned, it formed a direct connection between Diana's body and Alexander. The prince gasped as the energy flowed into him, his eyes widening with shock and then understanding. Through their connected hands, Rowan felt his mind touching hers, recognizing her true identity even as he accepted the power she channeled toward him. "Rowan?" His voice echoed in her mind, impossibly intimate. "Yes," she answered silently. "Help me stop him." Their mental connection strengthened, bolstered by the Luna blood magic. Together they turned toward Logan, whose ritual was unraveling before him. "No," Logan snarled, abandoning his ceremonial posture. "The power must flow through me." He lunged forward, grabbing for the king's throat with clear intent to take by force what the ritual had failed to transfer willingly. Magnus reacted with surprising speed for his age, breaking the blood bond to defend himself. The ceremonial circle shattered, moonlight scattering across the hall in fractured beams. Chaos erupted. Nobles screamed. Guards rushed forward. Lady Victoria shouted something lost in the din, and at the center of it all, Logan and Magnus grappled, the ceremonial dagger glinting between them. Rowan moved without conscious thought. Diana's body responding with a grace and strength it had never known before. The awakened Luna powers enhanced her natural warrior instincts, making even this unfamiliar form deadly. She reached the struggling men just as Logan gained the upper hand, dagger poised to strike the king's heart. With perfect precision, Rowan delivered a strike to Logan's wrist, sending the weapon clattering to the floor. Logan's eyes met hers, rage and disbelief warring in his expression. "You," he hissed. "You should be gone, consumed by the ritual." "You underestimated me," Rowan replied, her voice carrying the dual tones of both her own spirit and Diana's awakening power. "As you always did." Logan's handsome face contorted with fury. "I made you what you are. I saved you from a meaningless existence fighting for a lost cause. The power we could have shared was never yours to take," Alexander finished, stepping beside Rowan with sword drawn. His eyes glowed with newfound power, the combined strength of his royal alpha heritage and the Luna energy Rowan had channeled to him. Logan's gaze darted between them, calculating even in defeat. Then his expression shifted, a terrible smile spreading across his features. "You think this ends here?" He laughed, the sound unnervingly hollow. "I've prepared for every contingency, old friend." His eyes locked with Rowan's, even death. Before anyone could react, Logan pulled a small vial from within his robes and drained its contents in a single swallow. His body immediately convulsed, a dark aura surrounding him as he collapsed to his knees. "What I cannot have," he gasped through spasming lips, "no one shall possess. The Luna power dies with me." Horror dawned as Rowan realized what was happening. Logan had ingested some form of curse designed to corrupt and destroy the very Luna blood magic he had sought to control. And through the broken ritual, that corruption was already spreading, dark tendrils of energy reaching out from his collapsing form toward Diana's body. Alexander saw it too. Without hesitation, he placed himself between Rowan and the spreading darkness, using his newly enhanced powers to physically block the corrupt energy's path. Where flesh met magic, sparks of silver and black erupted. "Get back!" he shouted to the stunned court. "Clear the hall!" Guards rushed to evacuate the nobles, while Magnus stood frozen, watching the supernatural battle unfold before him. Lady Victoria pushed forward against the fleeing crowd, her face a mask of maternal terror. "Diana," she cried, "the awakened power, you must contain it." Rowan felt the corruption approaching through the lingering magical connections of the ritual. If it reached her, reached Diana's newly awakened Luna power, the resulting magical catastrophe could destroy everyone in the palace. She reached deep within, seeking the core of Diana's inherited abilities. There, beneath layers of suppression and fear, she found it, a wellspring of pure silver energy, the true essence of the Luna wolves. Healing magic, protective magic, Magic meant to balance the dominant force of alpha power, not compete with it. As she connected with this ancient power, something unexpected happened. A presence stirred within her consciousness, not hostile, not frightening, but familiar in a way she couldn't immediately place. Diana. Not Diana's full consciousness, but an echo, a memory, preserved within the bloodline magic itself. The essence of what Diana had been, gentle, compassionate, far stronger than anyone had given her credit for. "Help me," Rowan whispered to this presence, this shadow of the girl whose body she inhabited. The response came not in words, but in feeling, acceptance, alliance, shared purpose. Together, they shaped the silver energy into a protective sphere around themselves and Alexander, who still stood as a physical barrier against Logan's corruption. The dark energy struck the barrier and hissed like water on hot metal, unable to penetrate but continuing its relentless assault. Logan's body had collapsed entirely, now merely a vessel for the curse he had unleashed. His final act of spite might still succeed if they couldn't find a way to neutralize the corruption completely. "Alexander!" Rowan called, maintaining the protective sphere with tremendous effort. "I need your strength." He turned to her, face strained with the effort of resisting the corruption that had already begun spreading up his arms. "Whatever you need," he gasped. "Your alpha energy, the royal bloodline. It can balance this, contain it." She extended her hand, still marked with the ritual blood. "Trust me." Without hesitation, Alexander clasped her hand. The connection between them, begun during the interrupted ritual, flared to full strength. Rowan felt his power flowing into her, not dominating as alpha energy typically would, but merging with Diana's Luna abilities in perfect harmony. The balance struck exactly as the ancient legends had described: alpha strength with Luna wisdom, protection with healing, power with compassion. Together, they turned toward Logan's corruption, no longer merely defending, but actively pushing back. The silver sphere expanded, engulfing the darkness and transmuting it. Where the energies met, neither destroyed the other. Instead, they achieved a neutralizing balance, returning to the natural order that Logan's ambition had disrupted. A final surge of power, drawn from both Rowan's warrior spirit and Alexander's royal bloodline, completed the cleansing. The corruption dissipated entirely, leaving Logan's body emptied of both curse and life. The hall fell silent save for the heavy breathing of those who remained, Rowan and Alexander at the center, Magnus and Victoria nearby, and a handful of guards brave enough to have stayed. In the silence, Rowan became aware of the presence within her. The echo of Diana, awakened by the ritual and the activation of her bloodline powers. Not fighting for control, but merging with Rowan's own identity in a union similar to the balance of energies they had just wielded. Alexander stared at her in wonder, still holding her hand. Through their connected palms, she knew he sensed the change as well. "Rowan," he said softly, for her ears alone, "and Diana both. How is this possible?" "The ritual did awaken something," she replied, feeling the dual nature of her existence settling into a new pattern. But not what Logan intended. The Luna Wolves were never meant to stand alone or to dominate. Their power finds completion in balance. As the reality of what had happened began to register, King Magnus approached them cautiously. The dark rage that had plagued him seemed temporarily abated, perhaps from shock, perhaps from witnessing the true power of balance demonstrated before him. "What just happened?" he demanded, looking from Alexander to Rowan with confusion and the first stirrings of awe. Alexander straightened, the glow of combined powers still evident in his eyes. "Father, what you just witnessed was the true heritage of these lands, not domination by alpha strength alone, but balance between alpha and Luna powers. The very balance our ancestors destroyed generations ago." Magnus looked skeptical, but something in his son's transformed presence gave him pause. "And Blackwood? His promises of a cure?" "Were lies," Rowan stated firmly. "He sought only to harness both your alpha power and Diana's Luna heritage for himself. When that failed, he chose destruction rather than defeat." Victoria stepped forward, unexpectedly coming to Rowan's defense. "She speaks the truth, Your Majesty. Blackwood manipulated your condition, exploited your hope for a cure to advance his own ambitions." Magnus seemed to age before their eyes, the weight of his mistakes settling visibly on his shoulders. "Then my condition may still have hope for improvement," Alexander said gently. not through forbidden magic, but through the balanced power that has been awakened tonight. The Luna Wolves were known for their healing abilities, particularly for wounded spirits. Rowan felt the echo of Diana within her respond to these words, a surge of agreement and purpose. Yes, healing was possible. Balance could be restored, not just for the king, but for the kingdom that had suffered under the imbalance of pure alpha rule for too long. But such healing would take time, understanding, cooperation between forces long separated. It would mean rebuilding what generations of conflict had torn apart, and most immediately, it would mean deciding her own future, as Rowan, as Diana, or as something new formed from both. The moonlight still poured through the skylight, illuminating them in its silver glow. But now, instead of fueling ancient rituals or power-hungry schemes, it simply witnessed a moment of truth between souls who had found each other against all odds. Alexander's grip on her hand remained steady. Through their connection, she felt his unwavering support, his acceptance of the impossible situation, and his determination to face whatever came next together. "The old texts speak of Luna and Alpha joined in perfect balance," he said softly. "The ideal leadership, compassion with strength, mercy with justice." His eyes held a question. "Is such balance possible for us?" Rowan felt Diana's presence within her respond with hope, with longing, and something in her own warrior's heart answered in kind. 3 days ago, she would have rejected any alliance with the royal family she had fought for years. Now, she saw new possibilities, reform from within, healing for a fractured kingdom, balance restored not through bloodshed, but through union. "I believe it is," she answered, surprised by the certainty in her voice, "though the path won't be easy." Beyond the circle of moonlight, the court would soon return. Questions would be asked. Explanations would be needed. The rebels waiting in the forest would need to be contacted, alliances renegotiated, truths revealed. But for this moment, in the aftermath of chaos, Rowan allowed herself to acknowledge what her heart had been telling her since waking in Diana's body, that perhaps her warrior's path had led her exactly where she needed to be. Not as conqueror or rebel leader, but as balancer, healer, bridge between worlds long divided. Beside her, Alexander stood transformed by the power she had channeled to him, yet fundamentally unchanged in his core values. In his eyes, she saw not the entitled prince she had expected to find, but a worthy partner in the challenge ahead. "Together, then," he said, echoing their earlier promise. Rowan nodded, feeling both herself and Diana in the gesture. "Together!"